Welcome to today's episode of People and Strategy. I'm your host, Mo Fatalbab, President of International Facilitators Organization. People and Strategy is a podcast from the SHRM Executive Network, the premier network of executives in the field of human resources. Each week, we bring you in-depth conversations with the country's top HR executives and thought leaders. For today's conversation, I'm excited to be joined by Stephen Childs, CHRO at Panasonic Automotive. He's also a daredevil who loves surfing, motorcycle riding, and skydiving. Welcome, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited about this skydiving bit, and you might be the first CHRO that I've met who's into skydiving. And I'm wondering if you see that as unusual, given that, CHROs typically are risk managers, perhaps, and you seem to be a bit more risk forward.
Yeah, definitely not risk averse. That's true. And I think the first time that I went, I actually invited a lot of people from Panasonic, and they were like, the HR guys invite me to go skydiving? I go, hey, look, if you get hurt, no workers' comp, right? This is all outside of work. But I think maybe it's a little different. As again, most of the HR people that I meet are, at least from a job standpoint, fairly risk averse. I'm definitely not, which we can kind of talk about how that maps over to corporate strategy and forward thinking and transformation. I think there's a tie there.
Yeah. Well, we definitely want to get into that. And I know that you guys have had some transformation, and so we certainly will dive into that. But first, tell us maybe a bit about your career journey and what brought you to the field of HR.
Yeah, actually, probably like a lot of HR people, I hear stories that I wasn't searching for HR. I think HR found me, which seems to be a fairly common story in the HR profession. Out of college, I opened my own temporary business, contract employment, staff augmentation. And there's a lot of HR in that, as you can imagine. Employees and workers' comp and payroll and drug testing and onboarding. And so I learned a lot of HR during that time frame, but it was really as a entrepreneur, business owner. And later on, I transitioned into executive recruiting, engineering recruiting. And then Panasonic actually was one of my clients, and they talked me into, hey, let us save a little bit of money. Why don't you come work directly for us? And that was 27 years ago when they were trying to grow a business from 400 people to, at that point, they wanted to double, but they did a lot more than doubling. So it's been quite a journey since I started.
How many employees do you all have now?
So a little over 8,000. I tell this story. Somebody goes, Stephen, how did you stay at one job for so long? Sort of knowing my personality. And I said, well, it's been something different every 2 years. In a lot of cases, it was a different job every 2 years. I started out in talent acquisition, as I mentioned, and basically volunteered for whatever bad job came along. People didn't want, I volunteered for that. I give that piece of advice pretty often: volunteer for things that most people won't take. And I think I've had just about every job in HR. But during that time frame, we went from 400 people again to 8,000 people. We went from revenue of 200 and something million to multi-billion in revenue. And we've acquired companies, and now we've been acquired. So it's been a journey for sure.
That sounds like an amazing journey. So to what extent was the change in the role every 2 years driven by the business climate versus by your desire and willingness to step into something that nobody else wants to do? And why is that advice that you give people regularly?
Well, I think it's a combination of both of those. I think the fact that the business was transforming so often into something else, that a number of jobs came open. So the ability to grow was there, but I think it was the willingness to take on, we're going to divest this whole division. Who wants to help do this divestiture, lay off these people and go through this reduction in force? And I said, I'll do it. Right? That didn't sound like something that's fun to do, but you definitely learn something through that process, and you help people transition as well as you can. Right. And then same thing, we just acquired a company. Who wants to help with this acquisition? I'd say, hey, I'm in. I'll help with the acquisition. So everything was to me sort of a learning experience. And then I didn't have to volunteer anymore. So whatever came up after a while, it was just ask Steven, sort of the old commercials. Mikey likes it. Hey, yeah, Steven likes it. Give it to Steven. Steven will take on something new. And that sort of became sort of my motto. And it's served me very well. And some of the things I took on, I wasn't ready for, Mo. So that's also good experience to take on something you're not quite ready for and figure out how to learn it really quick and then manage it. So,
Yeah. So I'm curious. I think that's really just stepping into your fears, or is it not having the fears in the first place? Because I would imagine that some HR professionals aspire to get to levels such as yours, and yet maybe they may not step into these opportunities that sound scary.
yeah, I think that's a combination too. I think some people really do worry about if I do this. I hear this a lot. If they don't feel like they have 80% of or 85% of what's required for that job, they're really hesitant to jump into it. And I never really thought about that part of it. Right. And some of it might have been the fact that it's naivety, yeah, being a little naive, but that sort of served me too, is just have some faith that you're going to be able to figure it out. And the stuff that you learn figuring out is actually, uh, it's better than actually going to a class. Now I'll say do both, go to the class and learn it and actually take it, jump in there in the fire and learn it too. There's multiple ways to do it, but I think I was always better. If it seemed like 65% or 70, I was in.
Now, is that something you developed, or were you born with it? This innate willingness to jump into the fire and go into the unknown and step into the fears and skydive.
Yeah, I think part of it, I think, came pretty natural to me. I think there was a little bit of a lack of worry on my piece, but I do executive coaching, and about half of my clients end up being CHROs for obvious reason, being a CHRO myself. And 85% of the CHROs that I coach have an issue with saying yes to things that they don't think they're capable of. So a lot of it is sort of that helping them with the misguided understanding of what they're capable of. This is their vision of what they're capable of, helping them through that and actually saying yes. I have a book coming out too. And one of the chapters of the book says it's about the power of yes and saying yes to stuff that really scares the crap out of you, Mo, right? If you say yes to things, get involved and do that once, the next time becomes easier and the next time becomes easier. And eventually that fear is sort of like change management in general. The fear, I wouldn't say ever goes away. If I get on a surfboard in shark infested waters, I still feel a little bit of nervousness when I do that, but I've done it enough to where it's not going to hinder me from that experience. And then when you do something really hard, you learn a lot, and there's a lot of confidence building once you do something hard. Even if you fail and you pick yourself up and do it again, there's still a lot of confidence building in that process, which you need for growth. And you need to go into an interview and sort of exude some confidence that, hey, you're going to figure it out. If you don't know everything, you're going to be able to figure it out.
So, as an established CHRO, what's the moment in your career where you were included in corporate strategy, where you were able to drive change?
Yeah, I think you talked a lot about culture and whether we're going to be, worried about the culture transformation with being acquired. When we originally started this culture work on our own, I think that was the first opportunity, and this was the work started before I was actually a CHRO. And I think the work that I was doing to make us a best place to work company, really changing, I'd say first starting with candidate experience, and then that led to everybody experience and developing this culture. sort of led to this interaction with the executive team of how are you going to lead your organization, right? We started asking some real fundamental business questions. And I will say that most of the conversations with the executives were about profitability, product development, how quick we can do that, manufacturing operations. So when you asked about culture related to where that fit within our operation and corporate strategy, it wasn't really on the map. And we started this culture work, and I brought all the executives in to sort of deep dive on why this is so important, having them talk to CEOs and CFOs and CIOs. And when we completely revamped our organization, then I basically got brought to the table through the culture work. And with that, then it became sort of this story of, okay, what's next? How do we manage transformation? All kinds of transformation. I came back to the organizational change management, which kind of led to COVID happening, and then us leading COVID, us leading one transformation after another, to where now any transformation happens, they bring us in and we have that seat at the table. But I think the culture work that we were doing early on sort of gave us sort of the credibility of, hey, I think we can bring this team in and use them the way we need to transform not just our processes, but our people.
So how do you foresee the role of the CHRO evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, I think that goes back to what my president said to me 10 years ago when he gave me the job, when he came back into the office and said, hey, you're not just the VP of the organization, of HR, you're the VP of the organization. I think the reason you see CEOs promoting business people over HR people into those roles is the CEOs need business people. And they require, if you're going to have to pick a skill set, they're going to require the business skill set over the HR skill set, and then let them build really good HR teams. So my message to HR people is build the business capabilities. So again, make yourself undeniable. If you have all of these really great HR skills, and then you build your strategy skills and your transformation skills and your finance skills and your people analytics skills, I promise you, there's no way they're going to leave you out of the conversation. It's impossible, right? That would be a terrible business decision to take somebody who is really strong from an HR perspective that grew all these business capabilities and not utilize them the way they need to from being a part of all those initial strategic conversations.
That is wonderful advice, and I love that. So we're going to get back to your book in a second. I want to talk about that, but I'm not forgetting the fact that you've been at Panasonic Automotive for 27 years. So how have you seen HR change? How have you seen the role of the CHRO change during that time frame?
Yeah, tremendously. I mean, just like the company's dramatically changed, the role of HR has dramatically changed. I'm even from being highly administrative, more, I would say, reactive, to becoming very strategic and very proactive. And again, it kind of goes back to those business skills, having HR people having the business skills to be strategic. That way they can be proactive, right? The only way you're going to be able to be proactive if you're sitting in those strategy meetings or sitting in those board meetings or being asked to be a part of, the 5-year plan development. That's when you can be strategic. Otherwise, and still 50%, I think, CHROs are having to be reactive because they're not in a lot of those meetings.
And how do we get CHROs in those meetings? What do they have to do to get into those meetings?
Yeah, this goes back to some of the coaching I'm doing. And what I notice in a lot of CHROs, especially CHROs that, if you look at a lot of Fortune 200 companies and you look at CHROs, a lot of them are not career HR people. They're business people turned into CHROs. For that reason, because the CEO needs business. And I'll tell you just a quick story. You're talking about the transformation of HR during this time frame. And 10 years ago, when I took this job on, the president walked in. He's retired now, but he walked in and said, Stephen, I'm promoting you to VP and CHRO. And I was very excited, as you can imagine, going into that conversation. And he left, and then he came back later that afternoon. And he goes, I forgot to mention something. And I'm like, dang, man, I've been in this job 6 hours and I'm going, are you going to be fired? He said, no, don't worry. He goes, but you're not the VP of HR. And I was like, what? You just gave me this job. He goes, you are the VP of the company and I need you to focus on HR. So whatever you've been doing to develop your HR skills, I need you to double down on making sure you do that from a business perspective. And that was a really big eye opener for me. And then the first thing I did was go look at the top HR people in the US. Who are these HR people that I can sort of get some guidance from? And so many of them were not career HR people, they're business people. So what I started to do was I started reaching out to CHROs, some of the best, obviously, in the US. And what I noticed was so many of those were not career HR people. And even the ones that were career HR people had really doubled down on developing their business skills. And again, that was the main message for my keynote at SHRM 25 was you have to be a business person first and an HR person second. That's where the business is going to pull you into those meetings. They're going to pull you into the strategy meetings. They're going to pull you into, like, my business partners, because they're business people now. They get pulled into the staff meetings. They're not left out of engineering staff meetings and ops staff meetings. They're brought in to help actually create the agendas for those staff meetings. So once you get to that point, then being strategic is a lot easier because you know what's coming or what should be coming. And you're helping with the corporate strategy which then kind of lends yourself, to creating a lot better HR strategy to support the business.
Yeah. We touched earlier on some M&A activity and acquisitions that you all have done. And I understand you've all just been acquired in December. So how does that impact your culture? And how do you prepare as a CHRO for that cultural change?
Yeah, I think if we spent so much time building this wonderful culture that we have, which has helped transform our organization to a great place to work organization. And the number one concern when we heard that this was going to take place, employees are like, are we going to lose our culture? And we said, hey, look, we're not going to lose our culture. We're going to make sure that we spend a lot of time explaining that to our new owners, which we did. We spent a lot of time working through that and got a lot of really great feedback from the private equity company to say, please, whatever you do, don't change it. They asked a ton of questions about what did you do and how did you get here and how did you change the culture to a point where, okay, that's part of your strategic value. So do not change it, right? If we're going to go an IPO in whatever time frame, we want to make sure that whatever the best parts of this organization, we don't mess up. And that was and still is one of the best parts of our organization. So, but as you can imagine, through any kind of change, people start really worrying. So we sort of had to double down on, don't worry, we're going to focus on this. This is going to be one of the biggest things that we build into this strategic plan as we get acquired. And people become a lot more comfortable that all this work and really who we become in this culture is not changing. So far, so good.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And has there been any part of it that's a little challenging for you all, or is it all smooth and easy?
Oh, no, it's a lot challenging. So one, you can imagine we're separating from 100 and some year old company, and all those ties and all those processes, interwoven processes and shared service processes, everything's got to be decoupled, and that's a lot of change. So you're basically now separating from the mothership, so to speak, building all of those capabilities and resources within automotive itself and trying to do it over a short period of time. So you're trying to do your day job and then trying to do these separation activities at the same time, trying to develop all of those skills that are going to make you valuable for managing things that we didn't manage internally. So this kind of goes back to, lifelong learner is it doesn't matter what transformation you're in, you better be digging deep and learning as much as you can. And certainly we've been doing that. It is very challenging to uh, put in a lot of new processes, convince everybody it's going to be okay, and then make sure at the end of the day it will be okay.
And one of the things that's enabled you to be so successful is your ability to build relationships with others in the C-suite. Can you talk about how you've managed to do that so successfully?
Yeah, I think you know even coaching people internally within Panasonic, and I coach a lot of high potentials that are coming up. And I basically say, go start having conversations with everybody. And once you start having conversations and you walk up to the CEO or the CFO or the CIO, if you're a director in another organization, and you say, hey, Mo, what is it that you're missing? What is you're not getting from our organization? Or what can I do different to be a bridge builder for my organization? Some of that came a little natural because I was in talent acquisition early on. So I had to deal with every functional group. So I had those relationships. But at the end of the day, I still do that. I still reach out to the C suite and say, what are you missing? What are you not getting? I know my team's great. I know you're getting a lot of good stuff, but what aren't you getting? And having those conversations and building those kind of relationships. And you do that often enough, maybe they don't tell you everything the first time you go in and ask, but you start asking more than once, and then you start getting some real answers. And it's sometimes very humbling because you realize some of the stuff that you've really been missing. And then you get a little upset too, because why didn't you tell me this like 8, 10, 12 months ago? But you didn't ask. So once you start asking, it starts really building those relationships. So it's, I'd say it's communication.
Yeah. And I see, of course, in just listening to you, you've evolved incredibly as a leader. What are some of the lessons you've learned through your journey outside of just saying yes?
Yeah, I think one that I certainly learned early on when I moved into some leadership roles was it wasn't about me anymore. So it became about my team. And the more that I quit focusing on me and my career development, not that I quit focusing on that, but I was more hyper focused on developing the people around me. So hiring really good people that were better than me, right? And being excited about that, not worried about that. Putting those people in positions to get some visibility. The more that I did that, the more I hired really good people, the more I gave them visibility, the better I got at my job. And the more I was seen as a C suite level, even before I was a C suite level person. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're a coach on a team, and you're putting this team together, and you're making sure they have all the tools. You're knocking down the roadblocks. But at the end of the day, your job is to take care of them and make sure they can thrive. Give them enough room to make mistakes. Let them make those mistakes because that's some really great learning in those mistakes. A lot of managers don't want their employees to make mistakes. And sometimes I'll go to the board and go to our executive committee and say, hey, by the way, I've just handed this off to so and so. It might go really bad for a couple of weeks, but don't worry. And when they come in, treat them just like you would treat me, give them a hard time, right? Really push them. And that's just going to help them from a growth perspective. So I get sort of a heads up that I'm going to let them fail a little bit. And then when they come in, I've got the support of the executive team helping this person grow. And it is a little painful for that person, of course, but that's sort of the beauty of the growth.
Yeah. Why? So I think that is a profound lesson. And so many people don't have the ability to allow that to happen. What do you say to those people, and how have you developed that comfort to say, hey, it's okay if this person fails a little bit and it's part of their learning?
Yeah, actually, we had to bring some people in to help. Really, when we were building that culture model, we brought in the Neuro Leadership Institute, David Rock's team, and we looked at a lot of the work Carol Dweck was doing around growth mindset, and we sort of brought all our leaders together and said, look, we know we give people a hard time, right? We want things done. We want it done right. We want it under budget. We want it with minimum mistakes, but we know that's not going to happen. And actually, some of the beauty of innovation comes with those mistakes. So we were wrong. Here's what we want you to think about. Go do this. Go innovate. If we're going to ask you to innovate, you're going to have to fail. Fail fast think through how to do that. Engineering brought in like IDO, the organization, to help them fail fast when they were thinking about product development. We did the same thing. We put all of our hypos through this innovation training that helped them feel more comfortable with that. Because again, leaders can tell you to go fail fast, but you're still very concerned what those repercussions are going to be. And you have to go, look, you've got to manage this right. So it took a little bit of cultivating, as you can imagine. But 3 years later, we had I think a really good leadership team. Not everybody made the cut during that process. The leaders, some just could not do that. And we ended up having really good leaders that were cultivating their teams, which is what we wanted. You say it goes back to that quote I heard a long time ago. Great leaders are those who develop great leaders. And so that's what basically we're asking them to do, is go develop some great leaders, but you got to let them mess up a little bit in the trenches.
And in thinking about Carol Dweck's work, which I love, she talks about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. So have you been able to change everybody in the organization to have a growth mindset, or
Not a
did
chance.
you?
Not out of a lack of working on it. We're still working on it. I think that's kind of, that was a big, again, part of what we were trying to do from a cultural perspective. We're really kind of explaining, we did some 90-day sprints around growth mindset, what it is, what it isn't, what does a fixed mindset look like, what does a growth mindset look like, and then, learning agility, adaptability. We did 90-day sprints on those things specifically. And we told people, look, some of this is going to be really tough for ones that don't want to gravitate towards that. But even the ones that really struggle with it did really great. Some of the ones that were already there helped coach the others. So we found out who those people were and kind of put them in sort of some coaching positions. But it's still a journey, right? It's still a journey it's like habit building 101 is you can spend, 90 days building a habit and it changes your neural pathways. But if you stop and you slow down a little bit, it's so easy to revert back to the old habits. So it's an ongoing journey for us to kind of keep moving in that direction.
Yeah. So this leads me to the topic of organizational change. And at SHRM 25, you talked about certifying, I believe, over 70% of your employees in organizational change. I want to talk about why that's important and how you all have done it.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of discussions about transformations. And we were going through a transformation. I won't get into the long story of that, but we didn't do a transformation internally so well, going back 10 years ago. We learned a lot from that, fell fast. One of those lessons learned was organizational change management, how to have a really good base of organizational change management within your company to help with any transformation. That could be an ERP implementation. That could be managing COVID when it hit us. That could be managing an acquisition, whatever that's going to be, part shortage, you name it. There's just a laundry list that those transformation companies go through. And what we learned a long time ago is we can't rely on a consultant to do it. We need people internally that have those capabilities. And so I built a OCM organization within HR. And we certified, to your point, we certified 70% of the HR people within my organization, to even include my executive assistant who's certified in organizational change management. We are certifying, I think we're at 98% of our high potentials have been certified at this point in organizational change management. So it doesn't matter what curveball we're being thrown. Again, part shortage, acquisition, you name it, tariff recovery, all these different things. We've got this bench of people that can go in and help with that transformation. Not only figure out what the OCM plan is for the business in itself, but how do we communicate to the employees, and which is one of the most important things. How do we make sure they know what's going on? They know what's happening next. They out of their comfort levels. So, and I say this to a lot of HR people when I do keynotes. I ask people, how many people are change experts? Almost it doesn't matter what the topic is I'm speaking on, because I want to see how many hands go up. And there's very few hands go up in a room of CHROs or HR people about being a transformation expert. I go, who's going to lead it for the people? who's going to lead it, right? Your CHRO is not going to lead. I mean, your CEO is not going to lead it for the people. It's going to be you. And if you don't have these skills, they're going to go around you and figure out how to lead these transformations without you and your team. So don't let that happen. Go get the transformation skills that you need to be a pivotal leader in whatever transformation coming, because a lot's still coming. AI, you name it. There's a lot still coming our way.
Do you all have a certain certification that you use?
Yeah, we based a lot of our change on ProSci, but we actually built it internally. So we call it ODXM. So it's a combination of organizational change management and organizational development. So that way, not only HR people sort of have that combination of the two, but all of our leaders and again, our hypos, high potentials are very versed in that.
Wonderful. So I want to make sure we talk about your book, and your much anticipated book is coming out, Just Be Undeniable. And I believe it's to help the leaders with behavior change and achieving breakthrough success. So tell us a bit about how to go about doing that without giving up the whole book.
Yeah, it is Just Be Undeniable. And the premise to the book, simply put, is learn the habits, the tools, and the systems that help you be undeniable. Make it impossible for people to tell you no to promotions, no to funding for your business. So again, it's not just for leaders. Mainly when I originally wrote the book, it's a lot of the tools that I use in my coaching practice. Part of it's saying yes, and part of it is, very much around habit building. Some of it's around change and how to manage change. It's very, very much the neuroscience of figuring out how you develop the skills that are going to last to get into whatever you're trying to do. Again, in this context, being in a leadership position. And I say this, and I say this in the book, and I say this on this podcast because most of my clients will probably listen to this podcast. So I don't say it lightly. It's 100% successful. The tools, if you just use the tools of building habits, developing systems, and doing the work, it's really amazing of how you can rewire your brain to accomplish things that I keep putting stuff on my list because there's no way that I'm going to guest lecture at Columbia, which was on my list, which I have. Whatever I put on my list, I work really hard and use the tools. And it's just still to this day, one of the best parts of my whole career are watching people use these tools and see what they're able to accomplish, which, a year prior, they would go, no way I want to be on this board. No way I'm going to be speaking at Harvard. No way I'm going to be doing whatever is on their list. And these transformations just keep happening over and over again. So it's really cool to see people use the tools, but that's basically it. It's the tools to really make yourself undeniable.
Well, I can't wait to read it. So a couple of things before we let you go. We got to touch on AI. What are you seeing in the way of AI and how it's transforming your work?
Yeah, I talked about this too in my keynote at SHRM 25, and I sort of ended with this because you talk about another transformation, you got to be ready for it. And I basically said, look, if AI is going to be a transformation in an organization, I promise you it is. And I promise you that CEOs are going to be coming to the HR leaders to go, explain to me what we're going to do and how we're going to use AI to make our organization more efficient, fast, efficient, flexible, and you better have an answer. And part of what I encourage my team to do is not only work with our engineering team to start working on tools, but they have to go through the training and really understand AI, what it is, what it isn't, the different versions of AI. There's a lot of things that are AI, machine learning to generative AI to you name it. So they need to learn what that means, which is going to help them work with whoever the engineers are that are going to come in, which they're doing now. I have engineers working with my team to develop digital twins of their work. But how do you develop those use cases? What is the best use of the AI within an HR organization, and how do you determine that? What research and who do you talk to? And then how do you figure out how to prioritize and sort of start that AI journey? So that's kind of what my team's doing. So there's so many free resources. There's no excuse not to have yourself and your team trained in AI and the tools and the strategy. And then that's just going to make the whole HR organization a lot more useful to help the whole organization go through the AI transformation, which is already here. And one thing that I put in my presentation is if you see where most organizations are in their transformation, and then you see where HR is so far behind the organization to begin with that it's going to take some catching up. So I kind of tell my team too, it's sort of you're doubling down on this. You're going to have to disproportionately do some training just to catch up with where the organization is from a strategy standpoint to be able to get a little bit above it to start helping with the transformation. So it's a lot of work, but hey, it's pretty exciting, right? It goes back to lifelong learning, and something's always been thrown at us to where we're going to have to dig deep and learn something new to be successful.
Last question, Stephen. What is one piece of advice that has shaped your work or personal life?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's kind of going back to saying yes. It's really tough. The change management aspect of saying yes to things, getting involved, networking, get out of your comfort zone. If you can get out of your comfort zone on a regular basis, it becomes really fun. It becomes really nerve-wracking at first, but then it becomes really fun. And I see that. I see that in people that I coach and people that I mentor. And as they start working through a lot of those yeses and conversations with other people, the amount of doors it opens up for people is really even hard to explain. And until you really go sort of a little more overboard than you're used to with saying yes to things, including learning and not just taking on some terrible jobs and some good jobs, but actually saying yes to learning and doing some other things, the doors become very frequent that get opened. So it's a pretty cool thing to watch. And it's been a really cool thing for me to experience, but probably even cooler to watch other people go through it.
And that's where we'll end it for this episode of People and Strategy. A huge thanks to Stephen for your valuable insights. Thanks for tuning in. You could follow the People and Strategy podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, podcast reviews have a real impact on podcast visibility. So if you enjoyed today's episode, leave a review to help others find the show. Finally, you could find all our episodes on our website at shrm.org/podcasts. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
SHRM.